Hello and welcome. You're watching India Now, and it is time for our media review segment where we try to make sense of, if any of us can manage to do that, of what our media houses and our journalists are up to. Now, who better than a principal anchor of one of India's most consumed TV news networks? We are joined by Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor, Associate Editor of NDTV. Thanks, Sonal, for joining us. Let me begin by asking you what it is like to be a journalist in the kind of volatile, if you like, a political climate that we find ourselves in the sense that there is an increasing need to comply or conform with one of the one or the other of the binary that we see unravel in the digital realm as well now, because the polarized conversation has now been carried forward to the digital realm as well, where either you sort of pander to the hyper nationalistic, jingoistic narrative, or then become a little too activistic. So how do you, in such a political climate, in such a volatile political climate, how do you manage to deliver nuanced, meaningful stories?
Well, I think, thanks for having me first up. Glad to be talking to the journalists of tomorrow, if I can call it that, and lovely to hear and want to learn in the process as well, if I can say that. But how do I manage to do this? Well, it's a question that you sort of wake up with every morning. It's a question one sleeps with. It's a thought that you sleep with every night as well. And over the years, as not just journalism or opinions in India, but across the world have been sort of divided in these two very right or left-wing factions, I believe my voice to be one which is trying to break out of it, trying to still talk about stuff that is relevant on both sides, trying to talk about stuff that matters to people and not the nation alone. I think I'm working at least on that path, and every day through small gestures, through opinions, through shows, through topics that we pick up to discuss on the program, through issues that we are trying to talk about on social media and give them more sort of a platform to be spoken about. Every day, the endeavor is sort of to break out of that binary, as you spoke about, and bring in that space for people, because I think people are fed up now. People are fed up by listening to opinions. I think people are fed up by even holding opinions. There is an evolving space, and it is happening right now. It's not going to happen in the future. It is happening now as we get into another election mode, where people are losing friends because they don't match in opinions, because they get too provocative, for lack of a better word over here, when they just catch up and they meet very little when they do these days in the pandemic that we've had. And we want to break out of it. So I would like to believe and at least work towards a conversation where there are no opinions, but there are facts and there is a message and there is a hope. That is at least a conversation I work towards every day. I feel it's important, not just as a journalist, but as an Indian, as a citizen, to be working towards it. It's something that we all find ourselves in these days. So just to say that it is hard to sort of make that niche for yourself, but I find myself surrounded with such great feedback every time we've tried to delve into a conversation which is more about Indians, which is more about you and I as individuals, which is more about what matters to us as people. And there I have got great feedback on people saying, you know what, this is what I really want to hear. You know what, I really want to engage in this conversation. And engagement, which is the key as we move forward in media. So I truly believe there is an evolving space now, and it is only going to grow here on.
Well, it's interesting, Sonal, that you talked about an evolving space and engagement sort of being the operative word here. So now that digital has redefined media organizations across the spectrum, not just TV. So, but there's also a sort of increasing need to be omnipresent on social media, ensuring certain amount of clicks and being viral on social media and all of that. So while there are no marketing pressures and while there are no, there's no pressure of TRPs, there's another sort of pressure that is like a sword dangling over a journalist's head. So do you think that there will be a certain kind of a formulaic pattern to digital as well in the coming years? And given that, how do you sort of prioritize and package stories for digital? If you could talk about your personal experience of doing that as well.
Yeah, so I think what you're trying to understand is what is the format moving forward of engagement with people despite the platform, because I truly believe platforms keep changing from print to VCRs to TV to digital to just Instagram to just text messages to just GIFs and emojis. We don't know how the conversation will be done in the future. But I guess what I've truly sort of learned in my own 12 years of being in the field and perhaps also understanding different forms of communication as they have developed is that the forms keep changing. The conversation pretty much remains the same. As far as your question on the formula is concerned, I don't think there is one. I don't think TV or digital today works on a formula. I do know that there are trends that come and go. So there was a time when the trend was that a news anchor would sit on TV and just read the news as it were. Then there was a trend, then news anchors started inviting people to give their opinions. Then there was a trend when people started shouting down those news anchors and people started fighting amongst each other inside the studio. And then there is now a trend where people say, just explain what you mean by this. The government is saying this one is saying that, just explain to me what it means to me and how it impacts my life. So I think what I'm getting at with this is that trends keep emerging. And any sort of trend is never to stay forever. The key to adapting, and this is more for people who want to get into journalism or people who sort of are in the space really, to understand that you've got to evolve with times. You've got to evolve with telling people the same news, the same authentic, the same. There is a Bible on how to report news, but there is no Bible on the form of it. It could be an Instagram reel today. It could be 140 characters not very long ago, which have become more. It could be just staying mum and just playing a song and perhaps getting the message across. The forms keep changing as long as I think your responsibility as a journalist is to engage in the conversation of the day. Still reporting facts, still telling them, still talking about what matters to people, what is pertinent to them, still talking about things that matter to you and I, and not what politicians want us to matter, not what the entire, the high powers want the conversation to be about. Still talk about that, but the form, if you miss out on that, nobody's going to be listening to you anymore.
But all the trends that you spoke about, how much of that do you factor in while packaging the story? And do you think in the process you lose the essence of the story as well? Because that is sometimes, you succumb to the, sort of the pressures of the trends. And in the process, you lose the essence of the story. That is something that we're
not really. Depends on what kind of story you're saying. I've never had to succumb, so to say, to any trend. In fact, I found them quite fun and engaging. I've always found new ways of telling a story very exciting. At the end of the day, I figured this out long ago when I was just an intern. And I used to go around carrying tripods for people all around the city just because I was so eager to learn about journalism that it's all about adapting yourself to the conversation of the day and how you do that. I, in fact, find conversations with people young as you very exciting. I feel the way you guys think, the way you guys are talking about issues of the day, it's very relevant. And if I want to add in my expertise, perhaps give you a bit of that nuance, tell you, you know what, there was life before 10 years. You know what? This is what used to happen then. And this is a trend that might come back.
Given
And
a
if
bit
I
of
want you to listen,
yeah.
and if I want you to listen, and if I want to stay relevant, I'm going to speak in your language. When in Rome, as they say. So I'm all up for it. I'm upbeat about what millennials and Gen Z have to offer when it
Right.
comes to communication.
Right. So, I mean, I can totally sense that you are like a digital enthusiast. So now when censorship comes into the picture, all of this seems a bit, like a distant dream if censorship comes in and penetrates digital news media. So what are your views essentially on censorship? And also with the sort of devil of censorship looming, investors of digital media become sort of whimsical, and it's like a little, because the media policy is so whimsical, investors become a little sort of skeptical, reluctant. So what do you think of censorship, A? And what do you think of the kind of model, the revenue model that digital news media should adapt, in the sense that, do you think that it can be solely subscription driven, or do you see advertising revenue shifting from broadcast and other conventional media to digital, and it's only then will actually...
Let me answer your second question first upon the model, which is very exciting, which is something everybody's scratching their head over, and I'm not sure who's cracked it, but it's a matter of hit and try. At the moment you try something, you see if it works, it does not. We are talking in the age, and just today news came out that Instagram is going to go behind the paywall as well, and they're going to take some of their people there. It's an experiment, of course. It will take a while for India to adapt to it, but that just gives you a glimpse about and Instagram also, classic example. They try out something, they see if it works, otherwise they roll it back, right? And like I said, there is no way to understand this giant of social media, which nobody really controls, or do they? We don't know.
Right.
And so, no, frankly, I don't have an answer to what model works best. I see
nobody has an
forms.
answer.
Yeah, I think different forms of news and different forms of content works in different ways. Right. It's quite an irony, although when people tell me that nobody's watching news these days, or TV is just like whatever, I keep going back to saying that the past 2 years in the pandemic, nobody, has consumed content as much as we Indians have.
Absolutely.
Is that TV? That is the question. Is that news? That is the question. So our appetite for content seems to be increasing. So somewhere we're not getting our format right. Somewhere we're not getting the storytelling right. So that people are very curious, very inquisitive to know a good story, to understand more detailed, nuanced things. They only switch off because there's no space for it these days on primetime news or on digital media.
Right.
So that should be your second question. The first one about censorship. Well, censorship, who defines it, is important. Censorship has always been there. That's important to remember. And censorship will stay in some form or the other.
Right.
But it will all go down to how engaged people are. Censorship on social media. Also, there have been experiments done in China. You are the judge on how that worked out. There is censorship that happens in other parts of the world, including India, on social media, and we can sense how that goes as well. So I think it will always be present in some form or the other. But I kind of have hope that social media will have a good knack to sort of crack that as well.
Well, that's more like hope against hope, but still hope. So I'll quickly end this segment with a quick rapid fire, if you like. So I'll just ask you 5
Love it.
questions.
Yes.
Right. So one thing, if there's just one thing that you would like to change about how news is today, what is it?
Not a very rapid response. I'm trying to think if there's a fiery answer though over there. One thing, if I could change about not more than 2 people speaking at one time.
That's, I think, US sentiments. So my second question to you is, what is that one most memorable story that you've done in all these years of being a journalist?
Good memory, bad memory. I have tons of memories and tons of stories.
The most abiding memory, let's say.
Well, most abiding. Well, there have been lots of moments. December 16th is the first flash that comes to mind, when I was there at Vijay Chowk, when I met with Nirbhaya's parents, when I was at the Singapore hospital and I saw 15 minutes before she was declared dead. So all these are very stark memories, which perhaps I'll carry to my grave always. They sort of make you who you are. I think I'm a journalist today because of that story. But one thing that still sort of gets my mojo, still keeps me going, is the story when I ended up going to cover a story in a Khap village in Haryana where they had banned jeans, but I was wearing one.
I'm sure that must have been hilarious. Also, so now my next question to you is, who is that one person in journalism that you look up to and you derive inspiration from?
In living in hope of a new mentor, a new person to look up to every day.
Well, that was like a diplomatic answer to my question, but okay, one book that you recommend and one book that everyone should read.
Oh, Lean In.
Oh, that's, yeah. And the all important question, which is that news channel that you consume?
Which is that news channel I consume?
Yeah.
Well, I like to think there are lots of channels, but they're not all doing news. There are few channels who are doing news. NDTV tops that rank.
Sonal, Mehrotra, Kapoor, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good luck, you guys.